Jafari. I'm the lead, oh, there we go.
Oh,
I'm the lead entrepreneur resident for the Human Healthcare Venture Studio at Entrepreneurship UBC, and my background is strategic marketing and business development in sort of biotech startups, as well as big pharma. I worked for Eli Lilly and Novartis, and yeah, so I work with early stage entrepreneurs in the area of health, which can be very much impact investors as well as impact ventures. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we do not just focus on financial return, we also look at impact as well. So it's great to be here.
wonderful. And thank you, John. I know that some of the entrepreneurs were asking during the previous session about how to measure and also demonstrate impact when they are talking to investors. So I'm sure that some of the questions that we come up at the end at the Q&A will be covering that.
Great.
Great, thank you. So we're about to get started on the presentation. But meanwhile, whenever we are having the presentation, if any of you have any questions, feel free to use either the raise hand button to ask your question, or you can also drop your question into the chat box. And then Ming, at the end, probably I will hope that I'll rely on you to relay the questions to us. We'll have 10 minutes of Q&A at the end to answer everyone's question. We can also stop in between, so feel free to jump in anytime, Ming, at the end of a slide to let us know if there are questions coming up. Great, thank you. I'll start sharing my screen then. Give me 1 second to do that. Can you see my screen yet? Okay. So today we'll be talking about pitching to investors, and we'll be exploring the essentials of pitching and really looking at key terms and data points to include it in an investor pitch. We'll review some fundamentals of what investors will be looking for, and finally look at some good versus not so good investor pitches. And I think we're ready to get started, John.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the things that I always think about when I'm doing a pitch is to think about what my goals are at the beginning. And if you're in the beginning of your venture, you may be trying to get feedback from different groups to understand, help you refine your business model, and understand the markets that you're looking at. Are you looking to identify mentors, advisors, raising money? That's obviously, eventually, that's something that's very important. Expanding your network. If you're hiring people, it's very important that they see a vision in the venture that you're doing. Pitching to identify new partners to grow revenue, as well as marketing and distribution partners. And so I would say for me, what I always do is think about, I like to do my pitches early with people who I know, who will give very critical feedback and give me a good sense of where I'm going and do they understand everything that I'm talking about. Some of it, I'm assuming that some of your pitches are quite complex. And so it's important to understand whether it's scientifically complex or the market is complex. It's very important for your audience to understand what you're doing. So it's always good to do an early stage pitch session. And so if you're part of an accelerator, that's one way that we do. So we have all our ventures do, I'd say 10 or 15 pitches before they even go to see investors. So next. So who is your audience? That's always quite interesting, especially now that a lot of the pitches are online. But if you can understand, I always like to see what they've invested in the past, what they like to see from their pitch decks, if you can find that. What are their passions? What makes them like really think about working with you or investing in you? I think the next bullet point is very important. What is the context? So are you at an early stage accelerator? Are you actually pitching to venture capitalists? Or are you at a business development conference where you're moving, every, say, 20, 30 minutes? We call that speed dating here, where you're meeting with different potential partners the whole time. Expectations, I think, are crucial. I think one of the things that is very challenging to initial entrepreneurs is that every pitch is very important, but you have to sort of maintain a way of not getting too up or down depending on the results of the pitch that you're doing. So, make sure that you're doing enough pitches, especially I like to do some my less important pitches with investors, et cetera, where I don't expect them to invest in my startup. But then if you've got people who you are very important that are very important in your network that you need to impress, then you've got a very practiced presentation and you've gone through it a few times. Um, in terms of investment history, I always do a very deep dive in terms of secondary analysis, looking at PitchBook or other databases to see where the groups have invested in the past, what strategics, meaning like companies, have invested in the space, and what were the outcomes. Next. So starting from the end, working backwards, definitely it's very important to have a clear vision of what your vision is, as simple as possible, and memorability. And so we always try to aim this for a fifth grade audience. That's the goal, and sometimes it's quite challenging. So what are you trying to tell the person or individuals? What are the top three things that I want them to remember? That is super important because you want them to go back and think about what your service, what your product is. Most of the meetings, I would say, your goal is to get to the next meeting. And if they don't remember you when they're taking their notes and they see a lot of different groups, then they want to remember you in a good way, by the way. It's not don't do anything outlandish. I've seen that happen, unfortunately, where people put together pitches that are a bit out of the norm just to be memorable. But I think that ultimately that will hurt you in the end. It's really important to be yourself, but also to be professional. Um, so what points will help this story? How is your story validated? One of the key things that I look at is the validation story. So if it's a scientific technology, what does validation look like? If it's a market type thing, and I think a lot of you are in the areas where you've got products and you're looking to market them, what is the validation that your product is viable, whether it's external regulatory groups or whether it's a customer? That's very important. And it's really important to be excited by the vision of your company. If you're not excited, the folks that are going to be on the other side are also not going to be excited. Be confident, even if you're scared to death, and leave a good impression with them. Make sure that you ask them for questions, ask them for feedback, but also be very confident in what you're doing. Next. So I think this is one of the most important slides of the deck, is that before you pitch, what is your sort of preparation required? So definitely homework on the investor. What is their focus areas, investment thesis, where they are in the status of their fund, what is their investment history, who do they like to invest with, who are the other firms or angels, et cetera, angel investors that they've invested with. Definitely know the state of your business. What are your financials? Have a very clear definition of where you are in terms of your finances, what you're looking to do. Investors really like to see, if they're going to give you money, what are you going to do with the money and how far will it take you? What will the validation look like? What will the marketing look like? What are your current metrics and your data points in terms of either the markets that you're looking at, current sales? What are the future looking like? And then moving to the pitch deck. So we give our ventures up to 10 external pitch decks to sort of look at what makes sense, what works, what doesn't work. Definitely do a spelling and formatting check. Sometimes your fonts are different on different slides, and some people, they'll take a good look at that, especially some of the junior analysts. Updating clean design is super important. I think that's something that I've struggled with quite a bit, but I've leaned on my co-founders to really, put together Canva slides or other formats which are very clean and really speak to the data that's evolved. The slide decks these days have evolved significantly. They're very impressive. It's very important to just have, like, some very great graphics, very simple and understandable. Make sure that your updated deck is saved to the data room. Make sure you have it in a PDF. And definitely practice and time yourself. So if you're in a pitch competition, sometimes you have, like 1 minute, you'll have 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and make sure that you hit those time points. I think that's something that our early stage investors at UBC, University of British Columbia, struggle with quite a bit. But by the end of our program, they're pretty good at completing their pitches within the allotted time. Next. Okay, so the outline. And this can be, you can move things around, but these are the key things that need to be there. So the intro, who you are, what your background is very important. And I would say the folks that I work with, they tend to undersell rather than oversell. Make sure that you really, give yourself as best possible representation of who you are, what you've done. What is your business name, the year it was founded, and what is the purpose of the company? What made you decide to create the company? What problem are you trying to solve? Um, if you have time, definitely the company roadmap and history is very important. So, why did you found it? What is your background? What is your co-founder's background? How did you meet? What inspires you? What are your accomplishments? And what does the future look like? Um, in terms of the business overview, so who, what, when, where, and whys, that's sort of marketing side of things, but also it's important to understand sort of who on your team fits different roles, what the technology is, and how it's validated, and then when and where is more of how, what is your timeline and your and how you're moving things forward, and why are you doing it that way? So, for me in the life sciences side, I always look at what the clinical trial pathway looks like and why we've chosen that, and why we think there's unmet need. The problem identification is super important. So definitely think about the problem you're solving and its pain points, and make sure that it's an actual pain point for the people that you're trying to sell to. I've seen lots and lots of early stage entrepreneurs solving problems that nobody seems to care about, or if like external healthcare systems need to pay for it, they don't care for it. What is your value proposition? What is your solution? How is it differentiated is very important. Differentiation is the key to any good pitch deck. How are you going to create the value? And in terms of impact, what are the measurements that you're using? Say whether it's you're taking carbon from the atmosphere, you're helping patients, and then what is your customer persona? So what do you want an external person to think about what you're doing with your venture? Industry insights or market insights. So what is the current state of what you're doing? What are the sales? What are the issues? Competition is very important. You need to understand your competition. And how are you differentiated to improve upon the standard of, whether it's standard of care in healthcare or the standard of different things. So I think some of you are involved with environmental startups. What are you doing to improve upon other like-minded individuals? And then intellectual property, that's another very important thing. So what are your solutions? If you have patents, that's great. If you don't, what is the know-how, or what is your moat to keep people from taking over what you might be doing and copying you? Timelines and inflection points. So what are the inflection points? Are they go, no go criteria? What are the details? High level in your pitch deck, but make sure you have backup slides in terms of the actual details, because you'll get asked about this quite a bit in terms of the timeline, and where the money that any investor or partner would invest in you to move your product forward. And then the ultimate value. What do you think? What is your projection in terms of what the market's going to look like in the future with your product available? Next. Business overview. So highlighting the pros and cons or challenges. I think it's important to be realistic in terms of comparing yourself to other solutions out there. If there's other solutions that are better than yours in one area, that's fine. You need to highlight that, or just mention it at least. So people want to see you as credible. So really understanding what is better about your product is very important, and making sure that others seem to care about that highlight as well. Um, in terms of the customer users and target market, it's important to I guess share notable insights, and really have a deep understanding of the market. So let's say there's 20 million potential customers. What actual percentage do you think would be viable for your product? Revenue model. I find this to be quite a challenge for my digital health companies that I work with. How are they going to make money now and in the future? Are they dependent on procurement from municipalities or governments, or can they go direct to consumer? What's the competition there? What are the projections that you can share, and what are they based on? I always like to do my financial projections and my market share analysis, give my projections, but also have very detailed assumptions, and so people can say, oh, I don't think your product is worth that, but I always go back to, well, what assumption do you not agree with? Um, and then, looking at deep dive into the revenue model, this is really important if you actually already have clients and products. What is the value of each client is also quite compelling to an external investor. If you have a lot of customers, you can use an average, and I think that's quite helpful. Um, and then, when you're starting to close your presentation, think about what you want them to go home with, share a final example, talking about maybe a patient or a person that's used your product and what the benefit was to them and the value, and whether they continue to buy your product going forward. Um, Team, who are your current team members? What are their backgrounds? I always look at ventures that are, say, 5 years out and see, look on LinkedIn and see what positions they have, and make sure that I understand where those type of people would be within my company, either now or in the future. Um, Current partners is very important, especially if you have a well-known partner. Your board members and mentors are also can be very helpful. They should be active board members and mentors. If you just have somebody that's listed that doesn't do anything, that tends to sort of backfire. Understand their related subject matter expertise and how it complements what you do. Um, and then moving to the ask, what is your investment required and the type of return that's potential on the investment being offered, and use real world examples within your market that highlight sort of the step up in value as you pick up different milestones. Um, I'd say use of proceeds is something that is investors are always asking for, and they want pretty you can do high level detail in a pitch deck, but behind that you have all the answers in terms of very specific information in terms of what your use of proceeds are and where will it get you. And then for depending on the investor, you can look at return on investment, exit plans. So are companies in your space, are they acquired? Do they do licensing deals? Do they go public? That's very important in terms of your comparable companies, deal values, M&A, et cetera. Next. Yeah, definitely highlight any recognition that you have, any awards, coverage in news outlets, anything that you think would make sense to an investor outsider that lets them know how impressive you are and what you've done and who you work with. I used to sort of poo-poo the awards and honors, but I think it's become much more important these days to get yourself nominated to different awards, get high level honors for the business and the team achievements. It creates a sense of goodwill around your startup. And definitely don't forget to close. There's a very important thing that you have to thank the investors for their time, let them know how to get in touch with you, and then how to access the data room if you get there, but really, what are the next steps? Make sure that you ask them what are the next steps for them, and if they have questions for you, understand, when crucial data points are coming. So I would say 50 to 80% of the pitches that I do, I would say investors will say, well, come back to us when you get to a certain point. So let them know, make sure that you understand what they're looking for in terms of moving your product forward, and when you expect to get that, and then follow up with them once you have that data and send them updates. Next. Problem identification. What problem or pain points is this your slide? I'm sorry, am I going over? Okay, sorry.
That's right. No worries.
I can't see
I
the
just
numbers.
Thank you so much, John. So basically, this is just a space for us to maybe interact a little bit more after what John has just told you. I know that one part, when I discussed with John about the slides, one part that we think is very important that a lot of the entrepreneurs kind of miss out on or do not do a good job yet of doing is the problem identification part. So I think it would be great if we would try to do this right now during the call. If you could either raise your raise hand button, or you can also unmute yourself to share, or you can also type in the chat, but try to give us an explanation of what kind of problems or pain points you are trying to solve, and how are you going to do that. For the listeners here, I know that John is here also to give you some advice and some feedback. I myself also do so. But for any other listeners, do also reply in the chat box. Are these pain points that you are looking at, are they convincing? Do you understand the proposed solution? And do you have any advice or questions for the entrepreneurs that are sharing? So I'll just wait a little bit to give time for you to share.
Hi, hi, Jonathan. In fact, over here we have some stories from a Vietnamese startup who wants to raise fund in terms of coffee because they need a lot of market education for those products. For example, high-end Robusta. Normally, Vietnam is famous for Robusta, but with kind of very low price. And now they need to concentrate on the, I mean, new story of Robusta with better quality and higher price, and they also call for investment from Canadian market. Who are you there? I think he's there. He's here already. And in terms of problem identification for the products that need a lot of market education, do you have any suggestion in, I mean, how to really shorten the problem and make people understand it in very short time?
Yeah, so I actually I went to Hanoi a number of years ago, and the coffee there was fantastic. So I see the value in what you're doing, but you have to get the experience, right? So I think, at least for coffee is a huge deal here in Vancouver and on the West Coast. So I think experiential marketing would be very important. Being able to interact with the roasters. There's a number of different, smaller, I would say, coffee places here in Vancouver and in British Columbia. The big chains, I would say, aren't that big here. Like Starbucks closed a number of different stores over the past, say, 5 years. There's still some Starbucks, but in general, it's more local companies like JJ Bean, and Waves, etc. And then there's sort of one-off coffee shops. So, um, What I don't know is the distribution network here, but there are different sort of coffee events here, and I think getting your product in front of these educated tasters would be crucial to getting some market traction here, at least in British Columbia, and then potentially also in Seattle. That's the center of Starbucks, but there's a lot of independent coffee stores and vendors in the country. And I'd say, yeah, it's a tough distribution network because there's a lot of smaller roasters here in the West Coast. Did that answer your question?
I think I'll also love to add a little bit because my first startup, it was a retail e-commerce brand. So we were in that kind of market where you're just another brand. And for me, the kind of problem I had to go a very long way to find the problem that I was trying to solve, because at first I was just like, I want to create this brand, I'm just going to launch. And then what happens when I launch is that people have a lot of different choices of accessories that they can buy from. So what is it that I have that I can persuade customers to buy? So I had to go a very long way of interviewing and interviewing. And in the end, I realized that many people wanted phone cases and t-shirts, but they wanted to have their own name on it. So it's just a nice design, but they wanted to have their own name on the phone case, and that makes it easy for them to give people as gifts. And so that was my problem identification. People wanted to give phone cases, or let's say phone batteries or little small accessories as a gift, and they wanted to be able to customize it by adding the name of the people that they're gifting for. So that was my problem identification, and then I started creating different kind of operating processes so that I could easily customize one by one kind of names for our customers. So I think it's about going out into the market and seeing who are the people who want to try this new kind of high quality Robusta that you're trying. Is it Robusta that you're trying to sell? Or there are roasters that are complaining that the Arabica that they are trying to buy is too expensive, and they wanted to have like a better high quality but better priced coffee beans? Or are they finding any problems with sourcing Arabica, which makes them want to consider other kinds of beans? Or are there customers who want to try something new, something from Vietnam, something exotic? So it really depends on you going out and seeing who are the people who actually want to try this new kind of coffee beans that you're offering, who would be willing to try out your coffee, to be educated to this new kind of product. But you have to find who are the people who want to try new things. And then you can narrow down from there what kind of customer profile they, how old are they, where can they be found, are they a specific kind of roasters, depending on big small. So go out into the market and see who would be the ones who are willing to talk to you, and then narrow down from there.
Great, thank you. I think maybe Tropical have already got the answer for their questions. Over here, we have another question. Yeah, this is a refilling business model. And Thanh, could you elaborate more on what's the problem you want to solve? And in fact, the questions around the refill business model for kind of cleaning products, and how is it? I mean, yeah, it's not a clear question over here. Maybe I'll chat to Thanh to understand more about the question. Yeah, Jonathon, could you look into the chart and see is it a good problem statement over here, implementing a circular economy model in businesses? How to reduce environmental pollution, utilize discarded biomass materials to create biomass fuel. Is it good problem statement? Maybe the question from Tung is this a good problem identification?
Yeah. It's a good problem, but I don't understand what the product is. Is it a biomass fuel?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I would lead with that, but I think, this circular economy model, reduce all of that's great, but it doesn't tell me. So you've got biomass fuel, but where is it coming from? What is the source? If you had the source, I think that would be more impactful.
So are you okay with that?
Xin chào mọi người, chào chị Minh. Anh ấy đang hỏi là cái nguyên liệu của em là gì ấy, thì em muốn chị có thể giới thiệu qua cho em cái sản phẩm tẩy rửa sinh học lên men từ bỏ dứa ấy, thì để cho anh ấy hiểu cái mô hình refill là gì và cái để dễ hơn ấy. Tại vì em không nói được tiếng Anh nên là em có dịch được ấy, em hiểu nhưng mà em không nói được ạ, nên chị giúp em với ạ.
Chị Minh ơi, đây là Thành ở bên Fuwa Biotech thì là khác với cả bên Phương Food đúng không? Hay là cùng một bên ý nhỉ?
Khác nhau em ạ. Bạn kia ở bên biomass fuel, còn bạn này là thuốc tẩy rửa, tẩy
Ok.
rửa từ cái dứa. Okay.
Thế thì Thành ơi, Thành bây giờ vừa nãy cái source mà John đang hỏi ý, thì cái đấy là của đang hỏi một bên entrepreneur khác ấy. Thì câu hỏi dành cho Thành là ở đây thì Thành đang nói là refill nên tổ chức thế nào thì tốt trong hệ thống nhà phân phối. Thì đây là một câu hỏi hay là nghĩa là Thành giải thích thêm được không? Chị đang chưa hiểu lắm là Thành đang muốn.
Vâng, em giới thiệu thôi là tiếng Việt cho nó quen. Em tên là Thanh ấy, thì là em bên ở Khoa Biotech, thì là cái em muốn nói ở đây là bọn em muốn là phát triển cái mô hình refill nhiều hơn, rộng hơn đấy, tại vì hiện tại bọn em đã có khoảng 200 điểm refill trên toàn quốc rồi, và bọn em đang có muốn là tổ chức refill và sau này có tương lai có thể refill cả quốc tế, ý là mọi bên ngoài còn bằng cái mô hình của em luôn đấy. Thì bọn em muốn hỏi là làm như thế nào để mình phát triển mô hình refill tốt nhất, và không nói chung là tổ chức như thế nào, đặc biệt có thể là giúp mình là xây dựng lại cái hệ thống, cái gọi như là cái quy trình để phát triển trong cái hệ thống nhà phân phối. Tức là hệ thống nhà phân phối ở đây tức là họ bán hàng qua qua rất là nhiều các cái người ạ, có thể là tổng đại lý từ nhà phân phối xuống tổng đại lý nhà phân phối, nói chung qua rất là nhiều cấp bậc như kiểu đa cấp ấy, mọi người hay dùng là từ đa cấp ấy, nhưng mà mình dùng là từ nhà phân phối ấy. Thì làm sao để phát triển được nó ấy, và mình có thể gợi ý cho mình một cái mô hình hay là một cái quy trình nào để giúp cái mô hình đấy nó tốt hơn ấy.
Câu hỏi này thì chị Minh ơi, em nghĩ là đang đi về mảng operations hơn ấy, thì mình có
Đúng
nên
rồi.
cover câu hỏi này hôm nay không, hay là chị nghĩ là nên để đến cái buổi mà
chị
mình
nghĩ là
có.
sẽ gặp riêng ấy thì sẽ trao đổi riêng. Okay.
Thế thì Thanh ơi, câu hỏi này thì để chiều nay lúc mà trên session ấy thì lúc đấy sẽ cover câu hỏi này của Thanh nhé. Bởi vì hiện giờ thì cái session hôm nay thì mình đang tập trung vào việc raise vốn và nói chuyện với investor như thế nào. Thì nếu mà em có câu hỏi gì liên quan đến cái cách mà em có thể giải thích về cái model của em cho investor thì em hãy đặt câu hỏi ở đây. Còn cái mà liên quan đến operation và liên quan đến khuyên em về cái model chính xác em nên làm gì thì để chiều nay mình nói chuyện private thì sẽ đến phù hợp hơn nhé.
Vâng, thì thực tế là bọn em cũng có gọi vốn để phát triển cái mô hình này ra cả quốc tế nữa, hiện tại bọn em cũng đang làm rồi, nhưng mà cái vấn đề đây thì ok, thì em hiểu rồi, thì em sẽ nghe mọi người các nhóm khác làm rồi em sẽ đặt câu hỏi sau ạ. Cảm ơn mọi người ạ.
Cảm ơn em.
I have a question, and it is how can the impact investor measure and manage my results if they are interested in my cooperative? The question I already posed, I already test on the chat box.
Yeah, so for Go Farmer, okay. So I see the financial impact, which is impressive. What are you doing to, I guess, what are the impacts that your goat cooperative are doing for the environment, or is it for sustainability? And you've got the goals there, which is great. I think tying something to the UN sustainable goals is very important. I don't know the numbers offhand, but I think if you have the UN sustainable goals with the numbers and then they had like the colorful squares, I always find that to be quite helpful. But what is the exact way that you are providing positive impact?
Yeah, I provide a finance to the goat cooperative, to goat farmer. In my side, I already record how many farmer got it, how many liter of goat they receive, and how many head of goat they receive. How much I already launched to them. Is my record, but my question is how can the impact investor they measure and they believe in that is SCE is right with the reality.
Yeah, I think you're tying it to the UN goals is very smart and strategic. And so I would compare what you do to other ventures in the space that are working on similar goals. I'm certainly not an expert. I'd have to know a bit more in terms of what those goals are, and your impact. But an investor is also going to care about the financial return and the fact that you've got a sustainable business, which it looks like you have. So I think, investors still want to make money. Otherwise it's a grant, right? So, the fact that you are improving the farmers' livelihoods, their families, et cetera, that's very important. If they are doing anything to help the environment, that's also another, but you have to measure that, right? And so I'd like to see some metrics for each of the sustainable goals that you're working on. And I think that would be very impactful.
You mean that each investor, they will have the individual metric to measure the result. You mean that?
Yeah, I like the way that you put in the UN sustainable goals. I'm going to look up the goals right now. So was it 4?
It's 1, 2, 4, and 15.
Okay, so no poverty, no, I can't see the second one.
No poverty, zero hunger.
Okay.
Gender equality, education, and the impact. The 15 is impact with the environment, land on environment.
Yeah, so by helping farmers reduce their poverty levels, that's certainly something that you should be able to provide specific metrics. Hunger, do the farmers produce more food? Let's see, the gender equality. How, I don't know how your business would impact gender equality, so you'd have to, I guess, educate the investors that are looking at that. And then the monetary, the financial return and sustainability of the business is important too. And it looks like you have that.
Sure. Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll see if I can so the Entrepreneurship University of British Columbia, we have a impact and a social venture studio, and I'll see if there's anything any materials that they have. I can send it through Trami to you as well.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so
Very
much,
good.
John. Ming, was there any question left or any sharing left that we wanted to cover before continuing?
There is one from Ziu. Are you there, Ziu? You can turn on your mic.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I have a question, and could you please? I would like to hear from you because we are very new startup. We start with a minimum financial resources, and we pitch at the SBC social business creation with a GIC this year. However, we are certified as a social impact business. However, we lack a lot of financial reports to make it possible and to implement our activities efficiently. So now my concern is how we can mobilize financial reports and from impact investors. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So I'm obviously not very knowledgeable about the impact investors in Vietnam, but I would look to see other ventures that have had successful investment. Are there any non-dilutive, meaning government grants, et cetera, that you could apply for? Also, if there's any collaborations with other countries for sustainable goals, I think that's that's one thing that I look at. So for example, in Canada, there's different agreements with different countries to invest in different industry sectors. So whether it's green energy or if it's carbon capture, biotech, et cetera, there's different ways you can get money from the federal government as well as the governments from the other countries as well. So without knowing exactly what you're doing, I think in general, I would look to see where there may be opportunities within the government sector, or local governments have been, at least here, quite interested in impact investing.
Oh, thank you very much. If you know any potential yes resources, it is appreciated if you can connect, happy connect and introduce. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing, and thank you, John, for answering their questions. I think we're probably ready to start on the next part of the presentation, and then at the end, we can have some more time on the Q&A.
Okay, now moving into the hard stuff. So what is your burn rate? How much money do you have on hand, and how much are you spending either each quarter or each month? And how long will that last you? Are there ways for you to modify that if you need to? What is your break-even point in terms of sales? What's your profit margin, what that looks like, and what are your marketing expenses? Your intellectual property, whether it's know-how, some of you are in areas where you don't actually have intellectual property, it's more of your networks, your know-how, and less so the patents. I'd say the hardest thing that I find is the business model and focus. So understanding, what your business model is, what are other similar individuals or similar companies doing, and how they make enough, it doesn't need to be a massively profitable business, but you have to be sustainable. And that's really important. Clarity on your revenue. Are you focused, are you getting revenue from a number of customers, or are you reliant upon one or two key customers? That's a tough one. I've seen that, heard a lot of people when they pitch to investors. So investors like to see lots of different, even if they have a strategics or a big company coming in, they want to have other customers as well. What are your metrics related to your impact outcomes? This is something, key performance indicators and metrics. I would say we at Entrepreneurship UBC are actually struggling with this in terms of we have a number of ventures that say that they're impact ventures, but we need to figure out how to qualify that to make sure they're not just saying it, right? So and I think the previous example of the UN sustainability goals is a great way to do that. Understanding how much you're selling per month is very important, whether it's products directly, what are your shipping costs, is it scalable, what is your customer acquisition cost? So that is a tough thing to do in terms of understanding how much your time, et cetera, it takes to get new customers. Is it all through your network, or are you meeting people at business development meetings? And then moving on to your competition, I always like to have a chart of my competition and then go through how I'm differentiated, and have my assumptions there. So, and then having an easy to understand diagram of the competition is very important. And then are you leveraging grants and tax credits? That's certainly important, but as you move on, it's going to be more important to impress investors in terms of your cash flow. And I think most investors will want to see that getting grants and tax credits is great, but if those tax credits go away, make sure that your business is sound enough to be sustainable regardless. Supply chain, I would have, a few years ago, I wouldn't have worried about this, but I think during the pandemic, the supply chain has been quite challenging in a number of ways. And I think Vietnam has actually benefited greatly due to the issues with China, right? So I think that I'd say the past like 2 to 3 years, the focus and moving supply chains out of China into other countries such as Vietnam will strengthen your case to get impact investors. Good standing with vendors, that's important. That's really, I don't think that's in a pitch deck. That's more in terms of a in your data room. How do you plan navigating the recession? That's a tough question. I guess it depends on your business. Hopefully you are all in areas where they're still growing despite there going to be a recession. Exit strategy is an underrated, I think, thing to think about. So I have people that I've worked with at Entrepreneurship UBC and people that I've met actually tonight. I was at a dinner before this. They sold at the right time. And because of that, they have financial flexibility to do whatever they want. And it's fantastic to see. So make sure that you understand the potential exits and, understand not just what you would like to get from an exit, but like what would drive you to an exit. Is it, a company that would help improve the distribution of your product? Is it a co-founder that has specific strengths that you don't have? Is it a license, etc.? So I think many entrepreneurs tend to hold on to their venture too long, where they should be trying to, if either seeking to sell it or identifying partners that can strengthen the business even further. Next. Okay, preparing for your pitch. Make sure that you understand your direct competition or similar companies in your industry. Make sure that you search YouTube and do search like the CEO's name, search for the company name or any key scientific people. Look for abstracts at different business meetings. Definitely complete exploratory interviews with people who have invested in your industry in the past. Also, former competitors, maybe they've sold their company, you can ask them. Understand really what the problem you are solving is, and then, how is that viewed by everybody in the food chain? So is it the customers, what do they think about it? And then what do you, like, say, regulatory authorities think about it as well? The next point is something that I think is super valuable and something that I've used quite a bit, is to make a list of questions that people have asked me over time when they ask about what I'm doing. And then if I don't know the answer, I get it from my co-founders, right? Because I'm more on the business side. And if there's a scientific question or if it's a market question, make sure that you have those answers ready for you. In fact, I'm having a meeting with my co-founder from my startup to go over all these questions I'm going to have when I go to Bio Europe next week. So that's something that I find quite important. Definitely make a list of the key conferences within your area of interest, both locally and internationally. I always like to download the table of contents for meetings and go back to it to see who has spoken on each area of interest that I'm in. And then I think when you're trying to be credible with an investor, if you can pull out development timelines and external collaborations for other ventures, that'll make your own business plan more tractable and more easily explainable to potential investors. Next. Elements to avoid in terms of a pitch deck. Ooh. Sorry, I'm going to make sure I'm not going over your slides, Trami.
Not at all. You feel free to share, and if there are any slides that you're not familiar with, I can do that.
I just got it now. Okay. So this is, Little Mo's history and looking at, local businesses. They had, lots of personal debt. They paid it all off. SEO, Mo's, took an investment of a big partner. It helped accelerate the business opportunity. And maybe, Trami, if you could speak to this a bit more, this is more your slide.
Yeah, so I think this is a lot of information on the slide, and I would you try to number of words and text that you have on the slide, because right now, if I'm an investor, I just have no idea where to look at. There are a lot of different colors. It has a timeline, but just because of the different colors and a lot of the text, I don't know what to follow anymore. So do reduce down the number of information that you are trying to share on each slide, and you want to make a point. I don't see what the main point of this slide is. So have one main point, and then the biggest text should be covering that main point. I know this is like a history, but I feel like this is too much to share on on an investor slide. It could be somewhere in your data room. If you wanted to share a little bit more about how the company was incorporated, what kind of debt you took on, how did you repay the debt, but it shouldn't be in like a pitch deck slide.
Yeah, it's a little busy. I think it's good to have it in a backup. And so this one is, oh,
Okay.
sorry,
Should I
you
move?
go to the next
Okay.
one.
Okay.
The thing that jumps out to me is that you see in 2009 we dropped consulting entirely. I would never put a massive pivot like that in an investor deck unless it's well known and everybody knows about it. I would say most ventures will have a pivot at some point, and so that's okay. You can speak to it, but I wouldn't have it as the front and center in your pitch deck. This slide is a bit busy as well. It's not simple. I think you need to make sure that you have your information in terms of the growth of subscribers, et cetera, margins, et cetera, and separate slides that are easily digestible to an investor. Yeah, this slide is also very busy. I like to see more of a customer dynamic slide where there's different lines moving forward, and it's very very straight and clear in terms of who is doing what and where it goes. In this case, it might be better if you had I'd say a bit less busyness, too many circles, and more of a understanding this is my market segment and where that fits within the bigger picture.
These are getting into the slide that you prefer, John. The great slides.
Okay. All right. So yeah, this one's great. Market opportunity, pet ownership by province, quite important. Very simple. Everybody can understand this quite quickly. You can look at this in 30 seconds and understand it all. I like the colors. It's not too busy.
The
Compound
texts are all in
annual.
one place.
Yeah, it's good. Next. Financial projections. People like to see projections moving up. Obviously, that's great. And your profit margin, really, if you can emphasize, the investment that you have in the distribution channels and your product development, how that decreases the expenses over time. That's quite important. And also, as a backup, I would look at how this would compare with your competitors in the industry. Next. Yeah, and then I think this goes to some of the questions that were asked previously about the impact. Very simple, like 40,000, food waste rescued, great. Jobs created, revenue growth rate, very simple that anybody can understand. I think that is the key. And for you, for those of you who are in the impact space, list them towards the UN sustainability goals. I think that's a great way to do it. You don't have to do all of them, but just the highlights. And then in the backups, you can have much more detailed information. And with that, I guess we go to Q&A.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
I'll just wait to see if there are any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can also type into the chat box if you have any questions about the presentation, or if you are encountering any difficulties when you are raising funds, and if you wanted to share some experience that you've had so far talking to investors.
cho mình hỏi câu hỏi bằng tiếng Việt đấy nhá. Hiện tại ở một cái môi trường ở Việt Nam á, thì có những cái quỹ đầu tư mà tạo tác động nào đang hoạt động không nhỉ? Mà họ đầu tư vào những cái mảng như nông nghiệp, nông dân chẳng hạn.
Cái này em sẽ để chị Minh trả lời nhé.
Sorry, Jonathan, will be answering in Vietnamese a little bit.
It's okay.
Yeah. Về cái câu hỏi này thì thật sự là các quỹ đầu tư tác động ở Việt Nam là nếu mà nói là đầu tư thực sự ấy, thì chưa có đâu. Mình phải nói rất là thật như vậy. Phần lớn hiện nay mọi người đang có quỹ đầu tư tác động, nhưng phần lớn mọi người đang tập trung vào đầu tư tác động về môi trường và thường là sẽ theo đuổi những dự án có yếu tố công nghệ cao. Và có khả năng nhân rộng ra được. Còn nếu như mà với các cái dự án về mảng nông nghiệp và nông thôn thì hiện nay cái nguồn vốn chủ yếu vẫn là một là nguồn vốn tự có hoặc là vay từ gia đình, bạn bè và người thân. Nguồn thứ hai là sẽ từ các cái quỹ microfinance mà nó lại theo địa bàn. Các cái quỹ tài chính vi mô này thì cái quy mô cho vay của họ nó cũng thấp, khoảng tầm 500 triệu trở xuống. Và cái khoản vốn trống thì nó vẫn là khoảng từ 5 triệu cho đến tầm khoảng 25.000 đô, thì 50 triệu cho đến 25.000 đô hiện nay đang là một khoảng trống rất là lớn trên thị trường. Và đôi khi thì có một số quỹ họ sẽ theo cái mô hình là sẽ đầu tư cho phụ nữ, những doanh nghiệp có phụ nữ làm chủ, cho nên là đi theo hội phụ nữ. Thì cái này thì chắc là anh sẽ phải nghiên cứu thêm về chuyện là trong team của mình có đồng sáng lập là nữ hay không. Ngoài ra thì có một số quỹ hiện nay có đầu tư vào phụ nữ, có đầu tư vào tác động, nhưng lại cái deal size khá là lớn và sẽ yêu cầu là doanh nghiệp mình phải trưởng thành ở cái mức độ mà có một gọi là doanh thu tương đối lớn. Thì để đảm bảo cái nguồn vốn vay nó có vay và đầu tư nó cũng có hơi có cái sự giao thoa một chút, là vừa cho vay vừa đầu tư, hoặc là một trong hai, nhưng mà đòi hỏi cái khả năng chi trả lớn hơn rất là nhiều. Đó thì thực sự đây là một cái khó khăn của những doanh nghiệp tạo tác động tại Việt Nam. Nên như lúc nãy thì Jonathon có gợi ý rằng là sẽ tìm một số các cái grants, những cái nguồn mà không đòi hỏi lấy cổ phần, hoặc là không có những cái can thiệp sâu vào trong doanh nghiệp của mình, mà là cho tiền không. Thì những cái loại grants này thì chỉ có thể đi ra từ các chương trình phát triển thôi. Dạ.
Vâng, cảm ơn chị Minh.
Dạ.
All right. If there are no any other questions, I know that we're at time now. So I wanted to thank you, John, for joining us today. And it's been wonderful to get to hear from you again and also learn from you. And I'm sure that the startups will have learned a lot. And in case that any of you later on, if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to email me and they can forward it to me and to John.
Great. Thank you all. It's great to
Thank you
meet
so
you.
much, John. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
You.
Thank you.